In this next video demonstration, we are going to install the DHCP service and configure a scope on server B. So I'm on server B here. I'm going to go to Start and Administrative Tools, and wait a minute, I don't have DHCP installed, so I need to install the actual DHCP server. So let's go to Server Manager, and in Server Manager we're going to click on Roles and then Add Roles. We are going to check the box to skip this page by default, and then check the box for the DHCP server and say next, and next again. Now when you first install the DHCP server service, it'll actually take you through a little wizard to set up your first scope. Now if you don't ever want to do this when you're doing an installation out in the field, you can always just skip right to the confirmation screen and just say install, and you can bypass setting everything up. But what I'm going to do is, just for the demonstration of this, I'm going to go back to where we just left off and talk about network connection bindings. These bindings here are the two interfaces that I have installed on my machine. I have a multi-home box, and the checkboxes mean that I'm going to be listening on these interfaces to serve up DHCP clients. If for some reason I did not want to serve DHCP clients on either one of these interfaces connected to the networks, I could deselect the checkboxes, and those folks would not be able to communicate with my DHCP server service. We're going to leave both of them checked and say next. For the Ipv4 DNS settings, the lab is calling for specifying your domain name in server B for the DNS, and 127.0.0.1 is a loopback, and I'm on server B, so that is fine. I'll go ahead and validate that. It is valid. Say next. The WINS server, we are not going to do anything with WINS, but if we did have a WINS server that we want our DHCP clients to get, I would hit this radio button and then specify the IP address for the WINS server. Again, we're not going to use WINS, so we'll just say next. Now we're going to specify a scope. So in step number 3, we're going to add a new scope with a name of your choosing. For the third network on the 201.202.203.0/28 network, with the default gateway of the last available IP address in the range. The network will be wireless and should not be activated. Okay, so we got a lot of information there. So let's go ahead and add a new scope. And the scope name, we'll just call this John Demo. That's the name of my choosing. Our starting IP address will be 192.168. No, I'm sorry. We said we were going to do 201. So let's do 201.202.203. Now the third network number with a /28 CIDR is going to be 1632.48. So we're going to do 49 because that's the starting IP address, because 48 is the actual network number. We can't use that to give to a client. And then finally the ending IP address will be 201.202.203, and then we'll go all the way to 62 because the network is 48, and we're going to end it out at and the next network number is 64, so we'll subtract 2 and come up with 62 because 63 would be the broadcast. So these are the available IP addresses that we can hand out in our range. The subnet type, I said, was going to be wireless. Again, the lease is 8 hours. We did not want to activate the scope, so I'm going to uncheck this box. And the subnet mask will be 240, which is a /28. And then let's see, did I specify default gateway? The last available IP address. So the last available IP address is 201.202.203.62 available in the range. I'm going to say OK. Now notice I could add additional scopes. So a DHCP server can hand out IP addresses from multiple scopes as a service. We're going to say next. Then I said we're going to utilize DHCP v6 stateless mode. Say next. Then we want to, well, we'll just leave this default here as far as the IPv6 settings. That ::1, by the way, is the IPv6 loopback address. Say next. Then we're going to authorize the DHCP server in the domain, which is very, very important. The DHCP server cannot be used unless it has been authorized in Active Directory. Let me clarify, a Microsoft DHCP server cannot be used unless it has been authorized in Active Directory. All right, I've got my credentials of what I'm currently logged in as, and I'll validate and authorize with those credentials. Say next. I've got a summarization screen here. Everything looks good. Go ahead and do an install. Take it just a moment. All right, it looks like our DHCP server service has succeeded. Say close. I want to close out of Server Manager. Now I'm going to go inside the DHCP snap-in under the Start menu. And the next thing in the lab we needed to do was create a new exclusion range for the first 3 addresses in the range. So this means that these are the addresses that will not get handed out to any DHCP clients. So I'm going to double-click my server name, double-click IPv4, and there's my scope that I created earlier. And there is my address pool, so 49 to 62. And I'm going to right-click in this white space and say New Exclusion Range. And I'm going to exclude the first 3 addresses, so 201.202.203.49, and that's going to be through 201.202.203.51. And say Add. Again, that simply means that these addresses will not be handed out. Now, the reason you would do exclusions is maybe you have servers that need to be statically assigned IP addresses, like, for example, your DHCP server. You should never set your DHCP server set up to obtain an IP address automatically. Maybe you have domain controllers, DNS servers, default gateway, the list goes on of items that are going to be statically assigned, and you want to see the whole range for management purposes of all your IP addresses, but you do not want to hand those out in the DHCP range. The next thing we want to do is create a new reservation for a client called Workstation 568 with a fictitious MAC address of my choosing using the 4th address in the range. So I'm going to right-click Reservations and say New Reservation, and the reservation name, we'll call this Workstation 568 as I specified, and the 4th available address in the range is 52. And the MAC address, fictitious, we'll just do a 1A-2A-3A first half. Let's do 4A-5A-6A second half there. Again, just a fictitious MAC address. Under normal circumstances, of course, you'd want to have the valid MAC address for the workstation that you're making the reservation for, because that's how the client actually gets the specified address that you're making a reservation for. When it pops up on the network and says, hey, I need an IP address, the DHCP server says, wait a minute, I have a special IP address for you based on your MAC address. We'll go ahead and say Add and then Close. And that satisfies what we need to do for this lab.